The following was recorded in front of a live studio audience at the Studio 21 Podcast Café. This is the United Podcast Network.
If you're building or buying or selling a home, the Real Estate Crew's got news for you at the Real Estate House Party.
With attorney Rick Carter,
Real Estate House Party.
paralegal Kathy Holtshouser,
Real Estate House Party. Come in, have fun.
and comedian Tony V. Now, here's real estate attorney Rick Carter.
Welcome and thanks for joining us here at Real Estate House Party. We have a couple co-hosts down today. Right?
I was going to say.
I know. We got
Beautiful cast with us today.
what's that?
We have a beautiful cast with us today. Not the Kathy and Tony aren't beautiful. But
Well, Kathy's off.
Gallivanting
Well-deserved vacation. She hasn't had
Yes.
time off for a few weeks. And we've been making her work pretty hard lately. A couple times, 11:30, 12 o'clock noon. She's been there till so. We thought
It's rough on her,
It's
yeah.
rough. It's been rough. And Tony V's skeet shooting right now.
wow,
The
okay.
Matt Light Foundation. So,
Ah,
and if you probably think that Tony's probably a little crazy up there with the skeet shooting, but he is.
He
You
is.
should.
yeah, I trust that man with a gun.
People,
Anyway,
people try to coach him how to do it. Yeah. Tony V, have you met Tony V before? He's
No, I haven't.
uncoachable. He's uncoachable. So we have Martha Harvey from Mortgage Network, right?
Good to
and we
be
got
here.
Jen Delisle from Keller Williams, the
Thanks.
founder, right? And you told me actually a group team.
Oh, Inspire.
Because they're all watching. The Inspire Realty group's watching right now.
I hope so.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
You didn't know we were going to be live, right?
Yeah, I did.
right now. This is
Here we
it.
go.
Well, in all our prep meetings for the show, you didn't know it. So
No prep.
no prep at all. So this
That's
is
how
good.
we prep for this show.
Exactly. It seems to work out better there. It's when you think too much about this, that's we run into trouble. But I thought it'd be great to have you two on because, Martha, you do a lot of lending in Massachusetts and New Hampshire.
Yes.
And you, New Hampshire broker, but you
Yes.
just got your Mass license,
I
right?
did.
That's very cool. So we're going to talk about some of the difference between Massachusetts and New Hampshire today. And
Perfect.
And you're going to, by the end of the show, you're going to tell me how you actually love attorneys, right? Because I preface our initial conversation was how New Hampshire, they don't seem to like attorneys around here. They love title
We
companies.
love title companies.
I know, but by the end of the show, you're going to say, oh, my God, what was I thinking? I'm going to use Carter Law Office forever. So, or I can change my name to
love it.
Carter
Title
Carter
company.
Title, all right? How's that sound? So what's going on? Before we even start on that stuff, the market has shifted in the last few months, huh? It's almost back to normalcy.
Almost.
Almost.
And you know what? It's very town specific, I think, and very
Yes.
price specific.
Yeah.
Some markets were kind of back to that normal
Right.
where maybe you have one or two offers, that kind of thing. But in other markets, it's still
Crazy.
We're bidding over.
Right,
We're seeing
right.
10 offers. It really depends. It's very specific.
Right, because we've seen the last couple of years that auction effect where
Yes. Yep.
25, 30 offers on a particular property, which isn't bad, but it's the lack of contingencies on the
Exactly.
purchase and sales that I think is
Right.
really throwing us off.
And hoping people are going to stay in that home a long time to make up for that, well over asking offer.
Right, exactly. So I know. So the contingencies have been a real problem. I seen the home inspection was probably the worst one.
Yes.
I would agree. Home
know.
inspection and appraisal gap coverage.
Right.
Those were the two big ones. I
So at
think.
the home inspection, I get nervous about that for everyone.
Yes.
For the listing broker, for the selling broker, obviously for the buyer. Here's some of the things I've got lately just from after the fact. So one had a foundation problem. Called me 4 or 5 months later. Luckily, we didn't do the closing. He didn't want to deal with anyone who was involved in the closing. Says, I got a huge foundation issue with my property. What do I do? And I said, well, what did the home inspector say? No home inspection.
Right.
I said, well, what about the purchase and sale? He goes, well, they had me buy it in as-is condition. So huge foundation problem. What else do I have? Windows are not closing. Sometimes, I don't know if you see it, sometimes people think during the buyer's walkthrough, they get to start negotiating things.
Right.
Almost
It's a little late by
a
now.
little late for
Right,
that.
too
So
late. Not
all of a
much we
sudden,
can
so I had one who actually, I don't think she saw the condominium unit. And-
Yeah, we've had a lot of those the
Yeah.
past 2 years. I don't see.
What is it, just all virtually done?
Yeah, we'll FaceTime. I've had clients I've never even met face-to-face where we're FaceTiming from across the country, and then they don't even come to closing. I just had one in Hampstead where they were coming from California. We closed on the house. The house sat there vacant.
Really?
For a month till they got here, and they just saw it.
You got to make sure it's the right buyers, huh? That's
yeah,
scary.
I mean, it's scary.
Yeah.
It's scary. So, but people are doing it all through
And the
FaceTime.
reverse is real trouble when someone's renting a place that they don't own, pretending to be the landlord.
exactly.
Yeah, or I'm sorry, the owner of the company there. So now I see most of the time where buyer's remorse is usually in that situation
Sometimes.
because they haven't done their due diligence on the property.
I
right.
feel like we're seeing some of that from like 2020. We've even seen folks that they're waiting for that 2-year mark, and because they have so much equity, they're selling.
Right.
Or they came here at the very beginning of the pandemic, and now they're like,
Right.
you know what? I think I want to go home.
Right.
And they're going back to Texas or wherever on the
Yeah,
West
yeah.
Coast. I've had a few of those
They're
too.
reaping their money and
Well, and
running.
companies are
'Cause they
starting
can.
to require people to come back to work.
Right, their jobs
So-
are changing
That's
again.
weird.
Shocking.
I hope Kathy Holtshouser is watching this. There's now going to be a requirement at Carter Law Office that she physically comes to work from now on.
No
would
more
that, Would that
remote.
be too much? I know. So yeah, we had one probably maybe a few weeks ago where the buyer was first time he saw the house. Buyers walked through and said, "This doesn't look anything like
The pictures?
the pictures I got."
Wow.
So and he backed out of it. Yeah, I think that's one of the first times I've seen that. So you're seeing that more with, well, not as much now. You're seeing home inspections now coming back.
They're making a comeback.
Yeah.
We're starting to do them. Maybe they're part of the contract, but for example, maybe we won't do a full one, or
Yeah.
we're going to say like we're not going to ask for
Right.
for everything, or
So you
up
just
to
use
a
it
certain
for
amount.
informational
Yeah.
purposes only.
Information only, and that way at least they're comfortable. They can get a home inspection.
Yeah.
So if there's something like a foundation or something just
Something
not we can't
over a
come to
certain
terms
amount,
with,
they
then
can
they do
back
have
out,
the right
yeah.
to back.
All right.
To back out.
Let me bounce to Martha with that question then, because I get this a lot. So on a lender's perspective, if they find an issue in the home inspection, put in the purchase and sale, your underwriter is going to want to see that taken care of
Yes.
by closing.
Or have an engineer's report if it's a foundation
Right.
issue.
Right.
So if you are planning on taking care of it yourself post-closing, our recommendation is less is more. No
Maybe
one,
a closing cost credit.
Exactly. Closing cost credit, reduction in sales price, combination of both.
Yeah.
However you can manage it, because any red flag property related will be scrutinized.
Even if you put in the purchase and sale, it's subject to a radon test, right?
Exactly, because then the
You're
underwriter
gonna wanna
wants to
see.
see that.
Right,
And it's Title V is different in Massachusetts because that's a requirement of the state.
Right.
So everyone's kind of used to seeing those. New
Right.
Hampshire has never adopted
Right.
it. Whether people still do septic inspections, but it's not anything like Massachusetts. But when it comes to
Live
some of
free
these,
or die in New Hampshire,
that's
right?
right.
But if it fails in New Hampshire,
Right.
you can't get your loan. So that's-
Exactly,
right.
exactly. So at least you're still protected, but it's not the law.
Right.
So
So in New Hampshire, you're not required to give a septic.
No.
They call it Massachusetts a Title
Title
V
correct, yeah.
certification. But in New Hampshire, so what do most buyers do that when it's a private septic system? What are they doing?
So usually we'll have that discussion.
Yeah.
Do you want to include septic or not? And we'll
Yeah.
give a ballpark. Hey, if it fails, this is going to be the price.
Yeah.
Just so you know up front. Are you prepared for that?
So this give and takes with the buyer or the seller?
This is, for example, I'm sorry, with a buyer,
Okay.
I might say. And then, but again, like Martha said, if it fails and the lender knows, you're not going to get that loan.
Right.
So that's incentive
So
for
if
the
it
seller.
fails, do most of the sellers take care of it then?
Yes, because
Yeah.
another buyer is going to come along.
Exactly.
And the same thing's going to happen. So most likely they'll take care
Right,
of it
right.
at that point.
But there's no requirement
No.
up here.
No.
Right?
And I have found over the years that once a seller finds out about a property issue, then they are almost required to disclose
Correct.
that
They
property
must disclose
problem.
it.
So
if their
that-
agent knows too.
Right.
Yes, So,
So in New Hampshire, you do have the seller's disclosure, right?
Right.
So, which is similar to yours. Is in New Hampshire is actually a requirement, right?
yes, we
Right.
have to.
Whereas in Massachusetts, that's one of the things where it's
They don't.
optional.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, if it's an estate, you'll get a seller disclosure
Right.
and it literally will say, don't know, don't know.
No
Right.
idea.
You know,
No idea. No idea.
exactly.
Right. I know.
Never lived in property,
Right,
whatever.
exactly.
So
How about well water? What do you do, and what are you guys looking for in New Hampshire? as far as water?
There will be like a potability test, which means
Okay.
it has to be drinkable. It can't have arsenic in it. It can't have, any of the state regulations on the levels
Right.
of all these certain minerals
Right,
that
right.
are going to be found in
So you're not going
water.
to give a loan if it's not up,
Correct.
up to.
Correct.
Right, right.
And some investors from the lending side do not allow for a water filtration system. They want to make sure that well water is good as is.
Oh, really?
They don't want you to be able
yeah.
to manipulate the numbers.
Right. Interesting.
Well, the type of loan, right? It really
Correct.
depends on the type of loan.
Definitely the type of loan. It's
So
not
if it
everyone.
goes, if it goes to you, so it could get denied the loan, right? Then it goes back to the seller. Have you run into situations like that before?
Sometimes even with new construction where they have to
Right.
provide potable water, but if it's, we'll try to negotiate or that kind of
Yeah,
thing.
yeah,
Because like arsenic's a big one, radon,
Yeah.
Yeah.
that kind of thing. But then if it's something else, if it's just like it's hard water or something like
Right.
that,
That's
it is
just
what
an
it is. You're
Exactly.
going to have to.
Right.
It is the
right.
granite state,
Right.
Good point.
Gonna have
Good
to
point.
fix
Good
it
point.
yourself.
The other big thing is in New Hampshire, we get this a lot with, and you probably see it a lot, with a Massachusetts seller. So in Massachusetts, they pay the excise state tax of
yeah.
$4.56 per thousand, and houses are about $1 million these days. So they're paying $4,560 on their sale.
New Hampshire is a little bit more
Little bit
expensive.
Yeah,
more.
$7.50
A piece.
a piece.
Yes.
Right. So they get whacked. If they're selling in Massachusetts, going to New Hampshire, then on that $1 million house,
Right.
$7,500, right?
Each.
Right. The other big difference between Mass and New Hampshire is New Hampshire just goes right into a purchase and sale.
Yes, it
Yes.
does.
No fooling around.
Right.
No.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Get
and
right to
and
it.
I've learned up here, because again, I practice in both states, they don't like addendums in New Hampshire,
No.
right?
Mm-hmm.
New Hampshire's, yeah.
They
Well,
put in like
We
the
do
little
put-
clauses.
yeah, little
Yeah.
clauses,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I remember
Handwritten.
That's the worst.
I remember years ago when I first came up to New Hampshire, I had my typical, and you're going to love this. This is going to be an example why you don't like Massachusetts attorneys, and we're going to get back to you in a second. But I sent my rider, which every Massachusetts attorney, we almost have the same riders. You know what I mean? We just kind of regurgitate it, send it back around. So now I get my New Hampshire deal. I sent it to this New Hampshire attorney. Who's he says, I don't have time to read all of this.
Oh my gosh.
Said, I've never heard that as so it was, and I had to tell the client, I said, I can either protect you as much as possible. I'm not sure if the seller's going to sign this, but the other attorney doesn't have time to read this. So
here we are.
Wow.
So back to you. Why do we not like attorneys out of Massachusetts? With 12 minutes. Oh, look at
Do I have to share this?
She's right.
Oh boy.
I've waited.
the hot seat.
I've waited and waited. Go ahead. Tell me.
All right, first silly thing.
Yep. Go ahead.
You make us drive to you.
Oh, that's
Like, can you drive to Waltham on Friday at 4:00? No, like we're insane. Like,
first of
we're in New
all,
Hampshire.
none of us drive anywhere anymore, so you're safe on that one.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing, usually the only thing I found is starting right away on the title work. Sometimes it's hard to, I find that some attorneys, not all, may wait till the very last minute. And then if we have a problem, it's too late. And so then we're going to have to bump the closing or something like that. So that's, I would say, the only thing I've run into over
You know,
the
when
years.
we do a title search, if I'm representing a seller, which I've always said this was a great idea, I'm applauded with this idea.
Good.
Thank you. No one ever does it though. When you list a house,
Yes.
the title search should be done.
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
See,
A great
Well,
idea. In insurance, too, pulling that.
Exactly, because I can tell you, I had a loan last year. It was supposed to close in July. It didn't close until April of this year.
Wow.
It
Because of
was
the title problem?
It was a license to sell.
Yeah.
The probate court had never been done properly because the estate attorney wasn't an estate attorney.
Yeah.
He was a family friend,
Yeah,
didn't
yeah.
file the right paperwork. It was land
those
court.
the attorneys you should stay away from.
It was land court,
Right
which
at
made
the
it
end.
even
Oh,
worse,
forget it.
which was still dealing with COVID.
Just learned about that.
So,
my license, yeah.
Oh, land court. Yes.
Haven't had that experience.
Oh,
So-
you're gonna love land court.
All I can tell you with, like from the listing side of doing title work and all, absolutely. Whatever you can do to unearth any issues up
So
front.
that's my
Yes.
suggestion. You
Yeah.
get a,
I think that's a great
you-
suggestion.
You're about to get a listing because you should see the stuff we've found.
Oh, I'm sure.
There's always some error or some
We had a couple big ones. First couple times this year I've ever seen this. The seller didn't own the property.
Little things.
I know. Worry about it. I know.
I had that happen to
Have you?
somebody where my buyer purchased a property.
Yeah.
The seller said, "Oh, I'm using my own attorney to do the deed."
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
fine. So then that seller went and turned around and said, "I'm going to sell the house now because I had
Yeah.
multiple
Yeah.
properties." Turns out that seller's attorney deeded the wrong house to my buyer. So the house my buyer was
problem?
living in wasn't even owned by, they owned a multifamily. It was just wild. I'm like, how does this happen?
So they deeded the wrong property.
Yeah.
Did they get the mortgage on the property too? I wonder. Well,
Yeah, it's wild, right? They had to fix it and all that so they
Yeah.
could sell the multi. But I mean, I've never had that happen. That's the first time for
Right.
everything, I suppose.
Yeah.
I've seen someone where they supposedly it was a 2-unit condo, foreclosed on one, but they foreclosed on the wrong one, foreclosed on the next door.
Oh no!
So there was always marketing. It's a mess. Yeah. Another one I saw where the divorce agreement said you got to deed this to my ex-husband, and that was never done. It's like
Right.
30 years ago.
Wow.
The ex-husband dies. Yeah. So that was a problem. There's divorce. I always think when there's certain scenarios when in a sales situation where you got to keep an eye on. Divorce is definitely one of those. That separation agreement. So, all right. What else do we not like about attorneys?
That's really it.
All right. So we're gonna be.
That's
So
not
easy list, right?
Not a
Oh,
laundry
okay.
list.
Oh, we're
That's
gonna be
Problem
giving,
solved.
we're all going to be giving hugs at the end of this. And, oh my God, I didn't know you guys were so
Well,
nice.
from the perspective of a lender, I can tell you a closing it's much more seamless, I find, with an attorney sometimes, because with the title company, you don't necessarily know who they're sending. It might just be a notary. So if it is just a notary, they're not explaining to the buyers, especially first-time buyers, and that's, the difference. If you're a seasoned buyer of property, you know what you're signing. You've seen all the disclosures. First-time buyers like everything explained.
Absolutely.
And they're nervous. It's the first large purchase that they've made in their life. So I think having the courtesy of having someone explain a note, a mortgage, here's your first payment date, all of those important facets to those documents that a notary isn't necessarily going to be schooled enough to know what they're making them sign.
What Jen's thinking. She said, I just came out of this podcast. Don't have to abuse me. I'll use you, okay?
I know where my buyers want to go.
I'll use Catalaravis for now on. Yeah, so.
That's just what I've
I know,
noticed as a
I know.
distinct difference between the two. And that's not always the case, because a lot of title companies do have attorneys that do closing. So
right.
I'm not making a blanket statement
Right,
at
right,
all,
right.
because there are a lot of title companies I do use. It's just a matter of, making sure that who they have send to a closing is important.
Oh, definitely.
So,
What we see a lot is unrecorded mortgage discharges.
yes.
Yes.
You probably
Especially
see those.
with all
on
the
yours.
refis.
New Hampshire's actually a little better on it, believe it or not. Massachusetts, I don't know. They do have a lot of issues on their closings.
I had it happen to me once.
Oh, you did?
I refinanced, and since I'm a realtor, I knew to check,
good for
and
you.
they never did it.
Yeah. And then they've mailed it to you, and you're going through all the reams of
Right.
papers trying to
Yeah.
find this
You know what people
discharge.
should do is they should check their title and at least check how they own the property too. But they also should check, and in Massachusetts, it's very easy. You just go on Mass Land
Right.
Records, and you see a mortgage on there. You just see if it's discharged or not.
Right.
But you probably we talked about on one of our other podcasts where the latest frauds are. They're conveying property out. People don't even know they're doing it. They're fraudulently
boy.
conveying out. Right, like someone who owns like 10
little
pieces
scary.
of property. They're just deeding out the property, so they don't even know they don't own it anymore.
Oh, my God.
But you also should check on how you own the property.
I think New Hampshire charges to view, unlike Mass Land Records.
Yeah, Mass Land
You can
Records.
check on, like NH deeds.
Yeah,
and you can
exactly.
see if you're
Some of that
Exactly.
stuff, yeah.
Oh, the other scam out there is I don't know if you get this from your buyers at all. When they close on it, they'll call me up and say, "Is this legitimate?" I have a company who just called and said for $99 they'll send me a deed.
Right, no. I feel like we always say at the closing table, that's a scam.
Yeah, good for you.
It's
Exactly.
just,
Yeah,
don't-
that's good because
yeah.
so a lot of people say, "Should I just
Between
spend it?"
that and all the warranties that they sell,
Oh,
and
yeah.
the life
Yeah, yeah.
insurance, know that the lender is not selling your information.
Right,
The lender
right.
will never do that.
Right, right.
They're
right.
going on public records.
Right.
They're
Right.
finding your information. They know exactly who you went through for a mortgage, how much you borrowed. So it looks like they have all these pertinent details that would seemingly be sold to you, but it wasn't.
Right, right.
So-
The oil companies used to be like that. Yeah. They were brutal. So, do you need? I heard you just bought your house. Well, how do you know that? So, but I would check to see. Everyone should do this, which no one does this, on how they own it. If you're married, do you own it as husband and wife, tenants by the entirety? In Massachusetts, that's a problem. If you don't put that on there, if one of you passes away, it doesn't go to the other person. So you
Now, what joint tenancy versus that? What's the difference?
So in Massachusetts, it's the difference between. You probably learned all this. You just
I feel like I just read this paragraph. I'm thinking back
Jen's
here.
saying, "Oh my God, they're critiquing
gonna be a test? They're
critiquing
gonna
me
quiz me
about.
again."
Is this a surprise test
Oh,
here?
boy.
Wow, I'm waiting for my professor to jump out here. So in New Hampshire, it's usually either joint tenant or tenant in common, which just means if one of you passes away as a joint tenant, it automatically goes to the other person. As a
okay.
tenant in common, it goes to whoever you designate. You correct me if I'm wrong, because you just
Hopefully I
studied all.
remember.
As a tenant in common, it would go to whoever you designate through a will.
Okay.
Yeah.
And in Massachusetts, there's one added, way to own a property, which is husband and wife tenants by the entirety, which gives you a little bit more advantages
Okay.
against creditors. So homesteads and a little different in New Hampshire and Mass. We do bounce around. I preface this show during our prep time saying we do bounce around. So homesteads are a little different in Massachusetts. Now you should put on a form. There's an small automatic homestead protection in Massachusetts, but you should put an affidavit on if you're going to own it as your principal residence, also to protect you against investors. So
And that's up to 350,000.
yeah, it could be up to 500,000.
Okay.
And in New Hampshire, it's automatic when you buy. What else do we learn from New Hampshire, Mass class?
what's
No
the
smoke
difference?
detectors needed in New Hampshire either.
No, I feel like my home inspectors always say it's live free or die. If you don't want to
free
put a
or
home
die.
inspector in there, or a
You do whatever you
fire,
want.
You don't have to, but I mean, we recommend
love
that
Common
you
sense.
do.
Yes.
I love the live free or die. I saw a guy in New Hampshire driving around on his motorcycle, no helmet,
Yeah.
a big gulp, on the phone, a radio going. I said, wow.
Blaring.
Blaring. They just don't care about it.
Nope.
So let's talk about, on your end, things that you've seen lately. And I'll tell you some of the things I've seen with people. I had a guy the other day who applied for one loan. On that loan, said no child support. He got denied on that loan for a couple of reasons. Goes to another lender. Again, no child support. Don't you know he has child support? I mean,
We recommend
that you don't lie on the application.
little things. It is fraud. But even from the standpoint of
I love that
something
form at close. I don't know if you guys have it.
Yeah,
Do
yeah.
not commit fraud. Oh, okay. I was just about to, but you gave me that form not to commit fraud. I better not now.
One last chance.
Yeah.
It's more the importance of telling all your skeletons
Right.
up front, because they will be found out. You
Right,
know,
right.
because of when the mortgage market melted down in 08 and 09, all these fraud and check and balance things were put into place by
Yeah.
whether it's Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac or whether it's the government, itself, that we are bound to follow all of these checklists.
Yep.
The checklists are all these automated systems that it's run through, and whether it's old properties that you've owned, or you might only be on the deed of a property because your
Let me ask you that.
parents.
So you can actually find nationally other properties that
Right.
person might own, right?
And a lot of times it'll end up being the parents have put the
Right.
property in a trust, and you're the trustee.
Oh, yeah.
And it's a
I just
condo
had
in
one.
Florida, and you don't
Right,
even
right.
know that
Right,
you
right,
own it
right.
because they just went ahead and did it.
Right.
I don't know. That's my parents' house.
Right,
Well,
right.
No, it's not.
Right.
And so now you're obligated on. There might not be a mortgage, but you're obligated for the taxes, the condo fees,
The HOA fee.
exactly.
Right. Yep. Yep.
So it's that can hinge if you are already kind of teetering on a debt to income ratio. It can really hinge on you qualifying. So say everything up front. Sometimes there's ways around it. Sometimes there's other programs that can accommodate for it that allow for over a 45 debt to income ratio. it's knowing up front so you're not having to scramble when it's 2 weeks from closing. And what do you mean my loan got declined?
Right, right.
You know, we like to know up front so we have a little bit more.
Now, do you
wiggle
guys
room.
ask what type of loan they're getting?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
because if you're getting a VA loan or an FHA loan, it's a lot different than getting a conventional loan, I imagine, right?
Right, right.
Do you get pre-qual letters, pre-qualification letters? Yeah.
Pre-approvals, we like. Pre-quals
Yeah.
aren't worth the paper they're
Right,
written
right,
in.
right. No, that's a good point. Yeah, pre-approvals. So how involved are your, that's a good point. How involved are your pre-approval letters to get it out of that pre-qualification stage?
A pre-qual, you know, just so the listeners understand, is really just you saying, I make X amount of dollars per year, I don't have any debt.
I'll
how
pay
much-
it back,
you know,
don't
you know,
worry.
I want to buy for $500,000, whatever. And I say, yes, you're fine.
Yeah.
The pre-approval actually verifies whether they're self-employed, we get tax returns. If they're salaried, we get W-2s and pay stubs. We get the bank statements that show that they actually have
So
the
you
down
actually have
payment.
all that before
All
the
of it.
pre-approval?
Yeah.
In the past year or two especially, it's been more important that we have that.
Yes.
And it specifically says that. Because when we're in a multiple offer against 10 or 20 other folks,
Right.
that makes a big difference.
Exactly,
You know, especially if
especially-
you write a little letter or something.
Right.
We try to do everything we can to have the lender say as much as possible. Has this been through underwriting? Things like that helps
Exactly.
a lot.
That's a good. So, what are some of the other criteria? If you have multiple offers, what are some of your criteria? And I know it's probably judging one offer against the other, but there's got to be some other elements to it. I mean, do you ever think? And I probably would if I was a broker. You know, who that other broker is involved?
Oh, yeah.
Because
Yeah.
if you know that, no, it's not like you're favoring, but you know that other broker
And how
is good.
How much due diligence
Yeah,
they've done for their
exactly,
clients.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I can tell in about 30 seconds after talking to someone how long they've been in business. So you can tell, but I mean, the seller ultimately is going to make the decision.
right.
But you're advising
guiding
them.
them, yeah.
And, you know, if I'm saying this person's experience, they're going to close, like, we're going to be fine.
Right.
Are we going to be able to work together if a problem comes up? You know, who are we going to work with the best?
What do
Because
you
we're
say?
all a team.
Commission insurance?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's a great way to
really-
put it.
Yeah.
And it is. It's surrounding yourself by the team of people, and whether it's a listing and selling broker working together, you know, and making sure everyone's working toward the same goal.
Right, right.
You know, you have your fiduciary
Fiduciary.
responsibility to your client, as do them to their own. But you're working toward everyone
Right.
selling this home and buying a
And
home.
part of that, you're looking at the pre-approval letter. If you get it some online company,
Yeah.
as opposed to
We
the
won't
Mazda.
mention names, but
No.
Right. And some aren't even online companies. I mean, there's some huge entities out
there's
there.
some national,
Right.
if I see that, I'll say to the, you know, have you even spoken to this loan officer?
Do you get the same
Right,
person
right.
on the phone twice?
Right.
Right,
Does
right.
even this company, you know, who am I calling? Are they on the West Coast?
Right.
I advise my folks, my buyers, to try to use somebody local.
And I
but-
think too, you know, when over the last couple of years, with all of the properties going over asking, you know, to avoid appraisal issues and all, having an online company that might have absolutely no idea of what our niche, you know, in whatever town you're buying in,
Right,
you
right.
know that at least it's a local appraiser going in instead of someone coming from, you know, the Cape to do
Right,
a Hollis, New
right.
Hampshire
right.
appraisal. It doesn't work.
There's some window company out there, a local window company, and they goof on all these.
Oh, the Situate.
Yeah, we don't even want to say
We don't want to say that online.
Woburn and
Peabody.
yeah, Peabody. They got the Hill and Haverhill there. So, all right. Let me ask you what else. What are some? Can I ask you about love letters?
Sure.
Do they still exist now? And
Well,
because
I
they're
mean,
frowning on those a little bit more now.
Well, because it's
'Cause
a
of
little
fair
bit of a
housing.
housing violation,
Right,
right?
right, right.
My example that I will say to buyers is say, hey, if you say, you know, we love this house, and for example, like maybe you say you have a dog, right? And the sellers don't like dogs, right?
Right,
That's
right,
always my
right.
example. There's something in there that is going to sway them
So
one
it's
way or
almost
the
an
other.
art to it. Yeah.
So, I mean, sometimes when a broker will allow them, we'll say stick to financing, for instance.
Right.
Like, I have a job.
Yeah.
Like, especially in the beginning of the pandemic, it was, I have a job. I know I'm going to keep my job.
Yeah.
That kind of thing where the seller would feel comfortable knowing, like, hey, this person's not going to lose their
I
job
heard some sellers
halfway
actually
through.
checking Facebook for some buyers
Oh, always.
to see if they really do have their job.
Yeah.
Make
yeah.
your account private.
People,
Yeah.
that's the
Yes,
first thing.
yes.
That's the first thing sellers do. We'll go look them up on
So they do.
LinkedIn,
Yeah.
look them up on Facebook. Oh, do we
Interesting.
like these? They do it. I mean,
Interesting.
they just do it. So.
Interesting.
I
So-
would.
Curious, who's going to buy my house?
Right.
if it's an emotional thing, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So,
I love the love letters that kind of the generic ones. Dear homeowner.
right. Well, they've put in 20. They give up, right?
Right.
Just do a
right.
save as.
Right. Now, did you your buyer's list must have been exhausted over the last couple of years?
It was rough. I think
Yeah.
we were exhausted.
Yeah.
It
I
was
know.
like a hamster wheel of
Right.
okay, Tuesday, Wednesday they're on, okay, showings Friday,
Yeah.
Saturday, Sunday, offers in by Monday at noon, and it was just like a endless cycle.
And I would have buyers, 4 different buyers bidding on the same home.
Yes, yeah.
Oh, wow.
And
Yeah.
so I've given them all pre-approval letters.
Right.
I know which one's not getting it.
Yep,
You know what I mean?
Right.
Based on what they're offering versus I can't say anything.
Right.
That happens
luck.
to us too.
Yeah,
I mean,
I'm
I've had
sure.
2 buyers offer on the same house, which is really hard.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
because of the buyer agency, I actually can't disclose that to either party.
Right.
Right.
And again, in the end, everyone's comfort level is different. This buyer might go here, this buyer might go there.
Right.
So it works, it is
And
what
I
it is,
am a
but-
firm believer in fate. I say that to my customers all the time. This one you might love and you lost. The next one you'll like more. And it,
Yeah.
it does work out.
Does that work?
It does.
Work that way?
It does.
So,
I know. So
But we're not seeing that anymore.
no.
you're not seeing that
But back to
auction
your
effect.
question about the financing, I think originally over the last couple of years, if someone had put in an offer for VA or for FHA, they were automatically just pretty much put to
Yeah,
the
they were
side.
at the bottom
Right.
of the pile.
Right.
They went for
And
cash.
and the big differences are it's going to be subject to appraisals,
yes,
right?
absolutely. You can't, it'll never be waived.
And with some of those loans, the lender might say you got to do repairs to the property.
Yes, especially
Yes,
FHA.
Especially
Yeah.
FHA.
Yeah, VA's not as bad,
Railings
but-
and painting, they seem
Yeah.
to.
the painting.
That
Really?
peeling paint.
Yeah.
Peeling paint. Oh my
Rotted.
God.
I've had buyers put offers
Jen's
in on
out
my
there
list,
painting
and
away before.
The buyers were doing it.
Oh, yeah.
They would do
Yeah.
like if you take our offer at a VA offer, they
Oh,
said
yeah.
we will come over and we'll
yeah.
scrape
We'll
this
paint the side of the
deck and
house.
we'll
Oh, yeah.
paint it. Okay.
Now we've had that too, and they say, all right, and the buyer will say, all right, let me just paint the house, and then the seller says, well, are you insured? And then
Right,
and then the buyer
right.
says,
Yeah.
I can get someone who's insured,
Yeah.
and then the seller's worried about, well, if we don't close, are you going to charge me for that? I mean, it's almost like, how about use and occupancy? I know we're running out of time. This is flowing by,
Totally flowing
but
by.
do you do use and occupancies or?
Yeah, like a rent back.
Yeah, because they were huge, and
I think it
Yes.
you
helps.
must probably have some criteria for that too, right?
Normally, I mean, you can get exceptions to it, but normally they cannot exceed 60 days from the date of the
Right.
closing.
Yep.
That's Fannie Mae.
Yeah.
They really just don't want it because then they start questioning occupancy. And
So use and occupancies, the buyer's allowing the seller to stay, in, the property
So
after
when
the fact. Yeah.
Exactly. And where it helped was buyers were able to give flexibility to that
Right,
seller
right.
that needed to sell their home to then buy the next one
Right.
because
Right.
they
It
weren't
freed up
taking
their cash.
contingencies. Exactly.
Right.
So, it worked out both ways. As long as the attorney writes in the paperwork
Yeah.
properly, there's sufficient insurance in case
Mm-hmm.
what happens if
Or
the
the
house
title company writes that in.
Yeah.
We'll get back to you on that in a second there. But you said there is an exception because I know what you're saying. They want the buyer to be in 60 days.
Yes.
If not, you could be considered an investor. You lose,
Correct.
and then it'll be a
Right.
different interest rate, right?
Like I've
Right.
had exceptions granted when people were relocating, let's say from the West Coast here, but the
Okay.
job wasn't starting until
Okay.
September, and this is April.
All right, so
the
there is a little
closings-
leeway on that.
Exactly. It just
Okay.
has
That's
to,
good
it
to
has
know.
to be
Yeah, that
very
is good to know.
specific.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
it might be an extra month.
Yeah,
They're not going to
yeah,
give
exactly.
it, carte blanche on the
Right.
the total.
Because that's
timeline.
usually why we're doing it. Job change or
Yes.
school finishing.
Right,
It's usually
right.
job change,
Right.
though. So we did it quite a bit.
And
Exactly.
it was great for both buyer and seller because the seller's biggest fear when selling their house is they have no place to buy.
Right.
Right.
So this gave them a little bit of
little
a
bit of
buffer.
time.
Yeah.
You know.
A little bit of time, and it freed up their cash.
Yeah.
So then their purchase wasn't contingent
Right,
because
right.
in this market you can't
Right,
buy
right.
a house contingent upon
Right,
selling
right,
another
right.
house.
I did
Right.
see one recently. And I was
Oh.
like, shocker.
I haven't seen it in 2 years. I know.
I saw one recently too, but you don't see it.
Not on a new
often.
listing.
No.
The
If it's
house
been
obviously
sitting,
had been on for a
for
little
2
while.
weeks.
Correct.
God
God,
forbid.
old.
2 weeks. Oh, what's wrong with that house?
But it is getting back to statistically more of a normal market.
Right.
And a normal market is 3 to 6 months of inventory.
Right.
Right? I
Right.
mean, that was always the rule of thumb.
And you can
So-
definitely gauge when it gets back to normalcy about the contingencies. Not
Yes.
only the contingencies, but what's in that contingency. Like when it was really hot for the seller, they would say, all right, I want to stay in the property for 2 months, and
Right.
I don't want to pay anything for
Yep.
those 2 months.
Yes.
Yes.
You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
now you can see it shifting. they might still let them in, but now they have to pay the market
per
value.
diem, yeah.
So you actually can judge how the market's going
Right.
with the changes in the contingencies there.
Absolutely.
Well, I think we've learned a lot. First of all, we
talk all
learned
day
that
about
Jen's going to be
this.
using closing attorneys once in a while, and if
Yep.
she's not, I'll change to
Carter
Carter,
Law.
Carter Title. I'll do that, all right? So we'll do that. All right, I really appreciate you guys coming on.
Yeah, thanks
Thanks
for
for
having me.
having
We're going
us.
to do a seminar, right?
Absolutely.
In,
I think
in
we
the
have it.
national
Great.
area. We already
Yes,
have
we
it
are.
all put together.
Yeah,
And
yep.
we'll have more explosive information
Yes.
for you. Thanks for
Bullet.
joining us,
All right.
Jen and Martha, on the Real Estate
Thanks,
House
Rick.
Party.
The views and opinions expressed by the hosts, guests, or callers of this program do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the Studio 21 Podcast Café, the United Podcast Network, its partners, or affiliates.